Russia and Ukraine are gearing up for a summer of war, one that everyday people will fight.
I want the war to be over as soon as possible.
Citizen soldiers, including some trained by Australia, are heading to the front line, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
It's the most rewarding work I think I've ever done and probably will ever do.
Що скоро головні битви відновити повну лінію нашого державного кордону, як на суші, так і на морі.
But does Ukraine have what it takes to push Russia back? And what's waiting for them on the other side? Here's what you need to know about the Ukraine counteroffensive and why it's such a big deal. Be sure to like this video or leave a comment and subscribe for more from me and the team at SBS News. In a moment, you'll hear from people who are normally office workers, tradies, or taxi drivers who've joined the army to defend their country. And you'll hear from Australian army instructors who've spent the last few months training Ukrainian recruits in the UK. But first, let's look at what's happening in the war to bring you up to speed. In normal times, a European summer is something to look forward to, when families and tourists flock to beaches along the Black Sea. But this year, tens of thousands of Ukrainian men and women are leaving their families behind and heading east. The war in Ukraine is Europe's largest conflict since World War II, and now that the mud is dry, it's entering a new phase. In Bakhmut, these murals of a happy family provided hope after years of conflict nearby between Ukraine's army and Russian separatists. They were painted on neighboring apartment blocks in the summer of 2020. 70,000 people used to call this city home. Wars are full of symbols, and the picture in Bakhmut has changed dramatically. In recent months, the bloodiest battles have been here, where both sides have taken heavy casualties. Russian forces have been led by Wagner Group, a mercenary army of under-equipped and poorly trained conscripts and prisoners, which you can read about on our website. Wagner's warlord co-founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has been at the center of an increasingly public spat with Moscow, one that's reached a breaking point due to a lack of ammunition. At the start of May, Prigozhin aired his grievances with Russia's Ministry of Defense in the most shocking way possible.
Вот это вот парни ЧВК «Вагнер», которые погибли сегодня. Еще кровь свежая. А теперь слушайте меня, сука, блядь. Это чьи-то, блядь, отцы и чьи-то сыновья. И те, которые не дают нам боеприпасы, сука, будут в аду жрать их потроха, блядь, с красным деревом. Учтите это!
Here's how the U.S. sees the situation.
Russia's attempt at an offensive in the Donbass, largely through Bakhmut, has failed. For Russia, this attempted effort, particularly in Bakhmut, has come at a terribly, terribly high cost. Russia has exhausted its military stockpiles and its armed forces. And since December alone, and remember now, some of the shelling and fighting over Bakhmut goes well back before December, but just since December, we estimate that Russia has suffered more than 100,000 casualties, including over 20,000 killed in action, nearly half of whom were Wagner soldiers, the majority of whom were Russian convicts that were thrown into combat in Bakhmut without sufficient combat combat training, combat leadership, or any sense of organizational command and control.
So why spend so much effort on this one city? The answer isn't clear.
Bakhmut, in and out of itself, doesn't really offer any sort of operational strategic advantage to the Russian military writ large beyond what's now become kind of a symbolic meaning. The capture of Bakhmut isn't going to open up any passive advance for the Russian military imminently, and all it's really done is burn through however many thousands of Wagner fighters it's burned through, as well as the equipment and ammunition needed for Wagner forces to have made the very, very small gains within Bakhmut they have made.
This gruesome act of public shaming appears to have worked. A few days later, Prigozhin said he was promised as much ammunition and weaponry as needed to stay in Bakhmut.
Ukraine has also expended a lot on the Battle of Bakhmut, and there's a debate among the analysts, and it appears there's a debate among the Ukrainians about whether it's all been worth it. And I think those people who argued that they should hold there felt that they were costing more than it was costing them, and they needed to buy time to prepare for the counteroffensive with the arrival of more Western military equipment, those sorts of things. So it's an open question that I don't think we can answer until we see what happens with the anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive.
Both sides need more soldiers. Russia says it wants real men to give up their civilian lives and defend the motherland. It's offering contract roles that pay around $4,000 a month. They'd rather have volunteers than conscripts. After a partial mobilization drive was launched in September, tens of thousands of military-age Russian men fled the country. It's now harder to dodge an army summons. Moscow wants to recruit up to 400,000 professional soldiers on a volunteer basis to bolster its forces in Ukraine. Ukraine's been on a recruiting blitz as well, with major help from some of the best armies in the world, who've trained and equipped 9 new brigades. Australia has spent months training Ukrainian army recruits in the UK as part of Operation Kudu.
It's an eclectic group. It can range from people in their early 20s all the way through to people in their late 40s and 50s across some of the other training teams. Across all of them, what they all have in common is the patriotism for Ukraine, their identity in who they are, and how much motivation they have for defending their homeland.
All the training that we've delivered up to this point is going to give the Ukrainians confidence on the weapon systems that they are going to have to utilize when they return to Ukraine.
Я працював столяром більшість часу, потім поїхав до Нідерландів, там працював будівельником. Після чого повернувся назад, також працював деякий час столяром і так застав війну. В першу чергу це захист своєї родини, а в-друге це свобода, свобода народу. Навчання тут, воно дуже таке насичене, круте, і взагалі щодо австралійських хлопців, вони працюють з любов'ю, так сказати. По ним видно, що вони розуміють, кого і для чого вони навчають. Звісно, це взагалі людиною, якою я був, коли я сюди приїхав, і тим, яким я зараз став, це просто небо і земля. Я вважаю, що це важливо хоча б просто, тому що, на мою особисту думку, Росія навряд чи вона зупиниться після того, якби таке було, да, що Україна програла б. Я не думаю, що Росія зупинилася б тільки на Україні. Це дуже важливо, тому що Росія, вона не бачить меж.
I know that the men that we've been training have definitely gained a lot of information that they really wouldn't have gotten from any other armies. I know that we've done the best training we can possibly give them, so I know that they'll be doing the best drills they can possibly do when they get over there. It's the most rewarding work I think I've ever done and probably will ever do.
They're just really cool guys, yeah. We love them.
Thousands more Ukrainian recruits have joined storm brigades.
Тому що наступати треба. Треба виганяти погану русню звідси. Тому що як всі, я сподіваюся, розуміють, що треба, чим більше народу буде воювати проти русні, тим скоріше вона закінчиться. Ось в цьому і пішов.
У вас був досвід до цього?
Досвід лише
2 дні, щоб прийняти рішення. До цього я військовою людиною не був. Я жінці сказав, я вирішив. Я цей час витратив на те, щоб убезпечити свою родину і зі спокійною душею, скажімо так, піти в бій.
I want the war to be over as soon as possible, and I hope that the strike brigade will make it a lot faster. So I want to be more effective. That's why I chose it. Nobody likes training because it's hard, and we don't rest a lot. Always training, doing something. Sleep and train, that's all what we do.
Де ти? Щось попав? Готові. Один наш стоїть 30 їхніх.
Якщо це цивільна особа, яка не має досвіду служби в тих чи інших або в силових, або військових формуваннях, це десь приблизно 3,5-4 місяці. Це повноцінний такий є штурмовик, той військовий, який може виконувати достатньо якісно свої завдання. Ті військовослужбовці, і в тому числі і поліцейські, які вже мали досвід бойових дій, їм достатньо 2 місяці для того, щоб поновити свій функціонал і свої навички. Штурмові бригади для того, щоб вони виконали ту задачу, яка буде перед ними поставлена. А взагалі-то, як для кожного чоловіка чи жінки, є мета. От для них мета визволення України.
Ahead of the counteroffensive, Ukraine's received 230 tanks, more than 1,500 armored vehicles, and vast amounts of ammunition, according to NATO, along with Russian-made MiGs from Slovakia and Poland, but not the F-16 fighter jets that it wanted. Russia, meanwhile, has been digging, building up the most extensive defenses seen in decades. Hundreds of kilometers of trenches and occupied territory, and even inside Russia.
This is an age of war in Europe that was thought to be over. And so we're kind of going back to this kind of conflict. And I think that the scale would be interesting and remarkable. The Russians have quite a lot of territory to defend in terms of this area all the way from the Dnieper eastwards, and they're aware of it.
President Zelensky said the counteroffensive couldn't wait.
Якщо чесно, це б дуже сильно допомогло. Дуже сильно допомогло. Ну, ми розуміємо, що так затягувати ми не будемо, і тому ми будемо починати ще до того, як у нас з'явиться F-16 або що ще, заспокоювати Росію тим, що у нас ще нам потрібно кілька місяців, щоб навчатись на літаках, і тільки потім ми почнемо. Ні, так не буде. Ми почнемо і будемо йти вперед. Вони вже змінили тактику. Вони вже думають про оборону окупованих їми територій. Це вже інша хвиля цієї війни. Це не проста хвиля і для нас, тим не менш, тому що ми розуміємо, що їх наполегливість на полі бою, те, що було на початку, розбите нашими силами. І сьогодні вони вкапуються, як то кажуть, вони роблять оборонні рубежі, тощо. Це буде складно для нас, буде дуже непросто. Але це вже друга частина. Це частина, в якій ми збираємось забрати ініціативу в цій війні.
Top officials are lowering expectations. The Ukrainian defense minister told the Washington Post that most people are waiting for something huge, and that he fears that may lead to emotional disappointment. Reznikov said 500,000 Russian troops are currently focused in Ukraine, with at least 300,000 inside Ukrainian territory. Ukraine has received more than $37 billion in military aid from the US, and billions more from the EU and other allies. The next phase will determine whether the tools and lethal training were enough to push back the once mighty Russian army.
Нет в мире ничего сильнее нашей любви к Родине. За Россию, за наши доблестные вооруженные силы, за победу! Ура!
439 days after Vladimir Putin announced the special military operation, we heard that he still expects victory in Ukraine.